All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of the team within our pelvic health division. Within our pelvic health space, we have two courses in clinical management of the fitness athlete pregnancy and postpartum. We have our 8-week online course where our next cohort is starting January 9th. And then we have our 2-day live course where we teach the specifics of the internal assessment and then bridge that into back to exercise with specific mention of the movements in CrossFit, including running, jumping, impact, barbell work, and return to gymnastics. If you are interested in that course, we have a bunch of courses about to get listed for 2023. We are going to be in Chicago, just outside of Chicago, January 21st, 22nd. And then I am in the Woodlands, Texas, just outside of Houston, the 18th, 19th of February. So if you are interested, make sure you go to ptonice.com and sign up. Okay, the Kegel. Today I wanted to talk about how I've been seeing this trend on social media that is actively discouraging individuals from performing Kegels. Anyone who is new to the pelvic health space, the Kegel is essentially a pelvic floor muscle contraction, an isolation style contraction where we are working on closing the pelvic floor, hence shutting down our sphincters so that we don't pee and poop when we don't want to be peeing and pooping. When we are going to the bathroom, trying to urinate or defecate, our pelvic floor muscles relax, and that allows the stream of urine or allows fecal matter to exit through the anal sphincter. When we think about the Kegel, you all are probably surprised because if you have heard us talk on the pelvic health, in the pelvic health division, you know that we are very much talking about function and really allowing individuals to get strong and do so in the rehab process for pelvic floor issues. And you may think, well, Christina, I never would have thought that you would be somebody who is actively encouraging Kegels. And because of that, I thought this would be a really good conversation to really talk about the Kegel and talk about where its place is in rehab. Because this oversimplification to never do a Kegel contraction ever again is really missing the mark. And so we're going to talk about it. Number one, when it comes to pelvic floor muscle training, which is largely really coming around the Kegel and teaching the Kegel, we have level 1, grade A evidence that the Kegel and teaching the Kegel can prevent or rehab pelvic floor dysfunctions across a variety of ages and circumstances, including individuals with athletic incontinence, individuals who are pregnant, individuals who are postpartum, or individuals who are nulliparous in different hormonal situations that are dealing with pelvic floor dysfunction. A lot of this literature is focused around urinary and anal incontinence. However, we do see that the pelvic floor muscle training, including doing the Kegel, can help with subjective complaints of pelvic organ prolapse as well. We don't have the same strength of evidence to say that by performing Kegels, we're going to see less descent. But again, what we're starting to see in the literature, or what we are seeing more consistently, is that outside of surgical issues or surgical considerations, the grade of prolapse is not really the defining factor, and it's the subjective complaints of prolapse that we're really tackling, similar to how we are starting to really conceptualize low back pain. That's number one. We should not be discouraging a piece of evidence that is unbelievably strong. I would actually argue that pelvic floor muscle training, if we took every rehab intervention, probably has the strongest amount of evidence to back it up. Out of anything that we do in rehab, it probably has the highest level of evidence. And so it's inappropriate for us to be saying, stop doing Kegels. The problem becomes when we just do Kegels, right? That's not the answer. Lying on our backs and doing isolated pelvic floor contractions is not rehab. It is the start of rehab in the pelvic health space. And that is where we can go wrong. And that, I think, is where the stop doing Kegel or down with Kegels type of messaging has really started to shine through. And that oversimplification, I think we need to talk about, and we need to integrate the Kegel into a framework. So, no, I do not want individuals to stop doing Kegels. I want them to do Kegels when they need to do Kegels. I want them to learn how to isolate a Kegel when there's an increase in interabdominal pressure. I want that to eventually go into their function. I want a prescription of Kegels that makes sense for the demands that is on a female's body. And then I want to discharge the Kegel when we have reintegrated the pelvic floor into a working system where symptoms are minimized or managed. And we can return to the Kegel and the cognitive load of performing a pelvic floor muscle contraction when needed, if or when symptoms flare up. So let's talk about that. When we start a episode of care for somebody with pelvic floor muscle contraction, that oftentimes will start with the internal assessment. With the internal assessment, we are teaching, or we are trying to figure out where a person lies on the spectrum of tone. So individuals who are on the lower tone side are individuals who have an underlying amount of pelvic floor muscle weakness. And therefore, when pressure is applied to the system, the muscles of the pelvic floor are not strong enough to close the sphincters completely, and we leak as a result. Individuals can also be on the higher tone side of things, and athletes can tend to bias here a little bit more, where we are holding ourselves in so much tension, kind of like trying to stay at the top of a pull-up or a chin-up, that when we put an increase in demand, because we're already doing so much work, we don't have anything left in the tank. And that, because we can't increase the demand more because we're already working so hard, then we leak. And in those situations, it's not a weakness issue, but oftentimes a tone issue. Our internal assessment and some of our external techniques help us to try and figure out where a person lies on that spectrum of tone. And it's not black or white, and there's a lot of gray there. However, we can kind of try and figure out where are they biasing towards, low tone or high tone. In both of those circumstances, I am going to be starting by teaching the Kegel. And I'm going to be teaching the Kegel in two ways. For a person who is low tone, I'm going to be trying to get them to contract their pelvic floor muscles against an increase in pressure demand in the body. That's going to be first teaching how a pelvic floor muscle contraction happens. And there's a variety of ways we can do that. And then the second part is coordinating that when the timing of the Kegel needs to occur when there's an increase in pressure. And that can be in the wind up for a cough or a sneeze. That can be in the prep for a heavy deadlift coming off the ground. And when we're thinking about that coordination piece, it's a technique that is known as the knack. We have a lot of evidence to support education around learning when the pelvic floor contraction happens. It's an anticipatory system. So the pelvic floor contracts, increase in pressure happens, and we can keep those sphincters closed. That's on the low tone side of things. This is session 1 or 2. Then for a person with high tone, I'm still teaching them the Kegel, but my prescription changes. Instead of focusing on the concentric phase where I need to be closing sphincters, I'm going to be focusing on the eccentric phase and allowing them to understand what that feels like to lengthen the pelvic floor, right? Just working on relaxation exercises when you're not really aware of where you tend to lie in general, where you stay, can be really challenging. So teaching that Kegel so that even if it's a 10% contraction, they feel that coming in together, and then really thinking about separating your sits bones and allowing that relaxation to occur is extremely helpful. Again, that means that when I'm in a high, working with a person in a high tone situation, I am still teaching the Kegel. My prescription changes. Instead of focusing on the concentric like I would for a person who is lower tone, I'm going to be focusing on the eccentric for a person who is in the higher tone situation. However, still day 1, we're talking about pelvic floor muscle contractions. I am not staying there, right? That is day one. We get the basics, we build that foundation, and now people do not live their life on their backs, and we need to integrate that into other postures. And specifically, we need to be integrating that into different functional situations. We take that exercise prescription, right? Again, I'm not going to be getting individuals doing isolated Kegels for very long, maybe a week or two, so they can practice that coordination piece on their own. And then when they come into the clinic the next day, we're going to try and work on that Kegel that they've been practicing and then integrating that into lifting up a car seat, picking up um, a barbell off the ground, picking up a kettlebell, doing impact movement, jumping, all of these things that are super important for our activities of daily living, but also for our athletic individuals who enjoy moving their body in a way that's higher impact or higher load and are having troubles with their pelvic floor as they get into higher levels of intensity or fatigue. And when we bring that all together, this framework is really beautiful in terms of how we can be conceptualizing pelvic health rehab that does not have us stopping doing grade A level 1 evidence work like pelvic floor muscle training. The framework is one, figure out where they are from a high or low tone perspective, teach the Kegel, apply the appropriate exercise prescription. And this is not do 100 Kegels every day. And it does not mean to do Kegels every single day for the rest of your life. It is having the right prescription. Then you teach the coordination of it and integrate that into function before discharging the cognitive capacity of having to do a Kegel every time we do a functional movement that was triggering for pelvic floor dysfunction. When we go through that framework, it really blends nicely into what we are seeing with respect to the evidence, the strength of evidence for pelvic floor muscle training, but it bridges that into function. And so I kind of want to bring this full circle and say, there is a time and a place for Kegels. They are extremely beneficial. They have helped many of my clients, just an awareness of the pelvic floor, how many holes we have, how the pelvic floor works, why there are leaking issues that are happening. Teaching that coordination, you can clean up a lot of individuals leaking with things like coughing and sneezing or laughing really hard. Where we fall short and where we need to really be pushing ourselves is that is only the first session, maybe two. And then we really need to be bridging that into function and allowing individuals to see where that bridge is. And then finally, we need to discharge, right? We don't need to be doing Kegels forever. If a flare up in symptoms happens, our athletes or our clients know what to go back to in order to retrain that system. But they don't need to be thinking about doing a Kegel every single time. I don't want them to be thinking about doing a Kegel every single time. And we don't need this bad case of telephone that is starting to demonize the Kegel that happens sometimes on social media. All right, that is it for me for today. I hope you found that helpful. If you are interested in getting more of the research around pelvic health, we have just launched our PPP on Ice newsletter. It's every 2 weeks. It's this week on Thursday. It's 5 or 6 links that are new research and things that are coming out in the pelvic health space. If you are interested, you can go to ptonice.com/resources and you can sign up for that newsletter. If you have any questions, if you have anything that you put in your framework that you feel like I have missed today, comment below. I would love to have a conversation. Otherwise, I hope you all had a wonderful, relaxing Thanksgiving and you are ready to tackle this week and get ready really for the holiday season. Have a wonderful Monday, everyone, and talk soon.